17 years of my life had been poured into Veyron systems, yet the marble floors of the Boston Tower felt suddenly foreign under my shoes that morning. I walked in with a quiet pride, expecting to be congratulated for another flawless quarter, the kind of numbers only my automation framework could deliver. Instead, I was ushered into a glass-walled office where Gareth Sloan, the newly minted CEO, sat with his tie loosened, lips curled in the kind of smirk that told me this wasn't a meeting, it was an execution. You're fired, effective immediately. No explanation, no gratitude, just those words, delivered like a gavel strike. For a moment, the hum of the city outside seemed to vanish. My throat tightened, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I gathered my notepad, the pens I always kept aligned by color, and my ID badge in the hallway. Eyes dropped as I passed. Jonas Rivera, the analyst who once shadowed me, tried to mouth something, but Gareth's assistant was already hovering behind me, ready to usher me out. I turned into my office for the last time, the place where I had written the backbone of every system Veyron relied upon. While boxing my books, a flicker on the assistant's monitor caught my eye. She had left her inbox open, and a subject line glared at me in bold, patent filing Harper automation framework, reassign under Sloan name. My chest burned. So this wasn't just about downsizing or new leadership direction. This was theft. He was cutting me out so he could put his name on my design, the one that had held this company together for nearly 2 decades. I closed the box slowly, slid my badge on top, and let the silence of the office settle like dust on old furniture. Walking past the row of desks, no one dared meet my gaze. To them, I was already erased, but as I reached the elevator, a calm certainty rooted in me. They think they cut me out, I whispered under my breath, but the system remembers who built it, and somewhere inside the servers humming above us, my code was already listening. That night, my apartment felt smaller than ever. Cardboard boxes from the office sat unopened by the door, like gravestones to a part of my life I hadn't buried yet. I brewed a pot of coffee that tasted bitter, the kind you drink not for flavor, but to keep your hands busy. My laptop hummed to life, and with a few keystrokes, I was staring into the veins of the system I had built. Lines of logs cascaded down the screen, glowing like a pulse monitor. To anyone else, it would look like gibberish, but I could read it the way a mother reads her child's face. Patterns, warnings, adjustments, it was all there. My framework wasn't collapsing, it was adapting. 17 years earlier, I had sat in the corner of a public library, headphones in, coding until the janitors flicked the lights as a signal to leave. I wrote with the conviction that automation could be more than shortcuts. It could be a living system. Payroll, data pipelines, even security alerts woven together in one lattice that could anticipate stress before it arrived. It wasn't sabotage, it was foresight. And now, watching the logs, I saw my creation doing exactly what I had designed it to do. Gareth's directives cutting oversight, rushing patent filings, reassigning ownership had already been flagged as destabilizing events. The system didn't recognize authority in a nameplate or a corner office. It recognized integrity in the data flow, continuity in stewardship. Without me, it had no anchor. I leaned back, sipping stale coffee, my heart steadying as realization took shape. They thought firing me would strip me of power, but they had overlooked the simplest truth: you can fire a person, but you can't erase the fingerprint of the architect in her own code. The logs flashed another alert, time-stamped only minutes after my termination. Unstable reconfiguration detected. Autonomous defense protocol initiated. I set the mug down carefully, as though any sudden movement might break the silence of the room. Gareth thought he had stolen my life's work. In reality, he had pulled the pin from a grenade he couldn't even see. And by morning, the first cracks in his empire would begin to show. Friday night, the glass tower of Veyron Systems glittered over Boston like a crown. Inside, Gareth Sloan sat at the head of the mahogany boardroom table, wine in hand, his voice carrying with that smug bravado he thought passed for leadership. "Old talent is dead weight," he declared. "My name will be on every patent moving forward. The future doesn't need relics, it needs my signature." Laughter rose around him, the kind bred from fear rather than humor. None of them noticed the silent pulse inside their servers, the ripple of checks and recalibrations humming through the automation I had written. I wasn't in the room, but my presence was. Every transaction, every authorization request still carried the architecture of my fingerprints. They could toast Gareth all they wanted. My code didn't drink to him. At home, my phone buzzed with a secure message. Jonas Rivera. Quiet. Meticulous. One of the few analysts who had ever bothered to ask how my framework worked instead of dismissing it as magic. His message was short, but it hit harder than Gareth's words ever could. "They're stripping your credits from the research archive. Sloan wants ownership in 30 days. I set the phone down on the window ledge and looked out at the city. The Charles River shimmered under the lights, and I thought of the nights I'd missed birthdays, anniversaries, even the chance to see my mother before her surgery, because the company needed me. 17 years of sacrifice, reduced to an erased line in an archive and a man's hunger to put his name where mine belonged. For a long moment, anger swelled, hot in my chest. But then, as the log scrolled quietly on my screen, I felt something colder, steadier. My identity might be stripped from their files, but the system itself knew who had built it. It was already pushing back against Gareth's clumsy hands. I watched the city lights flicker like signals in the night and whispered to the glass, "Erase my name if you can. The code will speak louder than ink." And by the time the sun rose again, I knew the system would begin writing its truth for me. Monday dawned gray over Boston, the kind of sky that pressed low against the glass towers. I woke to the vibration of my phone skittering across the kitchen counter. At first, I thought it was another recruiter spam, but then the notifications began stacking one after another. Payroll failed. Emails bounced back undelivered. Meeting invites spun into endless loops. My framework, the one they thought they could simply rip from me, was convulsing in defense. I opened my laptop, fingers steady on the keys, and pulled up the live logs. They flashed like a fever chart, internal optimization conflict, anchor missing. The system was doing exactly what I had designed it to do under stress, protect itself from destabilizing hands. To the board, it must have looked like sabotage. To me, it was poetry. By mid-morning, Gareth's voice thundered across the building. One of my colleagues, still loyal enough to slip me updates, texted me from a locked meeting room. He's screaming it's a hack, threatening to fire IT. Marlo Chen just told him it's not a hack, it's the automation. Turning inward, I could almost picture Gareth's face, red against the sterile glow of the boardroom monitors, the veins rising on his forehead as he realized brute force couldn't intimidate code. More texts poured in. Payroll stopped. People can't pay rent. The servers are eating themselves. Celeste, did you know this would happen? I stared at the stream of desperate words filling my screen. My answer to all of them sat quietly in the hum of my apartment. Yes, I knew. But knowledge wasn't guilt. I had written resilience, not revenge. They had fired the anchor, and the ship was tearing itself apart. I closed my laptop slowly, the sound of the hinge clicking shut like punctuation at the end of a long, unbroken sentence. For the first time in days, I felt no sting in my chest, no ache of humiliation, just calm, steady breathing. They had taken my name from the archive, but the system itself was spelling it out across every failed transaction, every collapsing loop. And by Tuesday morning, the fractures would spread into something they could no longer deny. By Tuesday morning, chaos had become the company's operating system. My phone lit up with news alerts before I even opened my eyes. Veyron's official account, with over 5 million followers, had been mysteriously renamed overnight Harper's Framework. A name they thought they'd buried was now screaming across every feed. Screenshots spread like wildfire, hashtags multiplying faster than any PR team could contain. I brewed coffee and scrolled through the updates. Contracts were vanishing from digital vaults, entire archives reduced to blank directories. One client released a statement announcing they were terminating their multi-million-dollar partnership effective immediately, citing gross negligence in data stewardship. Others soon followed. Investors panicked. The stock line on my screen plummeted like a cliffside collapse. Inside the tower, Gareth fought to reassert control. A colleague texted me a live account. He's shouting at IT, demanding they pull the plug. But every shutdown command only triggered new failure loops. Whole departments were locked out of their systems, their badges useless at security gates. Someone tried to restore from backup, only to find the files looping into recursive errors, eating themselves. Marlo Chen, the head of security, finally cut through the noise. He leaned toward Gareth, his voice just audible over the shouting. This architecture wasn't built to be shut off. It was built to adapt, and it doesn't recognize us. I imagined the silence that must have followed, the dawning realization on faces around the table. They were interlopers in a house that no longer acknowledged their ownership. My phone buzzed again. People are crying in the halls. Clients are calling nonstop. Gareth looks like he's unraveling. I set the cup of coffee down, warmth lingering on my palms. My system hadn't been designed to destroy, but to protect itself from reckless tampering. Now it was holding up a mirror, reflecting every greedy shortcut Gareth had tried to force upon it. I walked to the window. Boston's skyline washed pale in the early light, and for the first time since being fired, I felt taller than those towers. They had stolen my name, but by morning, the world was chanting it back at them, carved into every headline. And by afternoon, the board would realize there was only one person left who could stop the bleeding. By mid-afternoon, the panic had reached my doorstep. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number, but the moment I answered, the voice was unmistakable. Gareth Sloan, usually smug and sharp, now sounded strangled. His words pressed through clenched teeth. "Come back," he said. "Fix this. We'll compensate you generously." I let the silence stretch until I heard his breath quicken. Then I answered. Calm? Measured? "You said effective immediately. I don't work for you." For a moment, he lost the polished cadence he wore like armor. "Do you have any idea what this is costing us? Every hour is millions. Our reputation is disintegrating. You can't just sit there while I cut him off. I didn't break it. You did when you removed the only person who understood it." His voice cracked into pleading, but I ended the call before desperation could turn into threats. I placed the phone face down on the counter, the vibration continuing for several minutes, a pulse of chaos I refused to absorb. As night fell, the city outside flickered with office windows burning late, as if Boston itself was staring at the implosion. My phone buzzed again, but this time the tone was different, an encrypted channel I recognized. Ilara Quinn, one of the Sharper board members, rarely wasted words. Her voice carried none of Gareth's panic, only clipped precision. "We'll meet tomorrow." Name your terms." I paused, letting her know silence was not weakness but negotiation. "Finally," I said. "Not for revenge, for accountability. If you want me in that room, it's to build something better, not to patch holes so Sloan can keep his crown." Alara didn't flinch. "Understood. 9, boardroom level 30. When the line went dead, I stared at the skyline, lights trembling across the Charles River. For years, I had been the unseen scaffolding holding up their empire. Now, with one decision, I had become the axis they circled. I turned off the lamp and let the room sink into quiet, a quiet I hadn't felt in weeks. Tomorrow, they would expect me to negotiate for survival, but I was already planning to rewrite the rules. The next morning, the marble boardroom gleamed under cold fluorescent light, but the room itself was fractured. Screens along the walls bled red with error messages, contracts half-loaded, dashboards looping into infinite error states. Executives snapped at each other, voices colliding like glass, shattering in the air. At the center of it all sat Gareth Sloan, his tie loosened, his skin pale and damp. His voice rose above the noise only in bursts of fury, shouting half-formed commands that no one obeyed. He looked less like a leader and more like a man drowning in front of his crew. When Alara Quinn motioned for silence, the room hushed. "Miss, Harper," she said firmly, her eyes on me. "The floor is yours." I let the pause settle before speaking. Years of invisibility had taught me the power of measured words. "The system can be stabilized," I began, "but only if authorship is restored. Governance protocols must be reinstated in their original form. That means acknowledging where the framework came from and why it was designed the way it was." Several directors shifted uncomfortably, but none interrupted. I continued, "I will not re-enter this company as a contractor cleaning up chaos. If you want my expertise, these are my conditions." I raised one finger. Reinstate my team, the engineers who built this with me, the ones Sloan sidelined. A second, establish a binding ethical technology policy, safeguards, oversight, and whistleblower protections so that no one can bury mistakes in the name of profit. A third, full transparency to clients. Every failure, every patch documented and disclosed. No more illusions. The silence after my list was sharp, until Gareth broke it with a bitter laugh. "She's extorting us," he spat, leaning forward with the last shred of his authority. I met his gaze without blinking. "No, I'm protecting what I built from you." The weight of my words pressed into the room. I could see it in the way Alara's eyes narrowed, in the way other board members avoided Gareth's stare. For the first time, they were no longer sure he was the safer bet, and in that hesitation, I felt the shift, the balance tilting, ever so slightly, in my direction. The air in the boardroom thickened with Gareth's sneer. He slammed his hand on the table and snapped. I had backups prepared. "Watch this." His fingers stabbed at the console, pulling up a directory labeled Fail-Safe Critical Recovery. For a moment, the room leaned forward, desperate for salvation. The screens filled with progress bars, lines of code rolling like a tide. Gareth folded his arms, smirking again, convinced he was about to prove me irrelevant. But then the progress bars froze. One by one, the files collapsed into corrupted fragments. Contract archives displayed nothing but question marks. Payroll data warped into unreadable loops. A gasp rippled across the room. Someone whispered, "It's gone." The color drained from Gareth's face as the errors multiplied. Those backups weren't backups at all. They were shells. Shortcuts he had ordered to cut costs. Empty files renamed to look like lifeboats. His arrogance had burned their last escape route. Ilara Quinn rose to her feet, her voice sharp enough to slice the silence. "Mr. Sloan, you've cost us billions. You've destroyed our credibility with clients, investors, and regulators. This company can't survive with you in command." Gareth lurched forward, face flushed. "You can't do this. She'll burn this company to the ground security," Ilara said. 2 guards moved quickly. Gareth's chair screeched back as he fought to stand, his protests echoing against the marble walls. "She'll burn it all." "Don't trust her." His voice trailed as the doors shut behind him. Silence fell. All eyes turned to me. Screens flickered red with chaos, waiting for an anchor. I stood, walked to the console, and placed my hands on the keyboard. "No," I said softly. "I'll save it. But my way." The logs rolled beneath my fingers as I re-established the anchors, bypassing Sloan's false architecture, reconnecting the framework to its original design. I didn't do it for the board or for the investors. They had already shown their loyalty was to profits, not people. I did it for the payroll clerks who needed their checks, for the engineers whose healthcare depended on the system running. By the time the monitors steadied into green, the boardroom exhaled as one. But for me, it was only the beginning of deciding who deserved survival. Weeks passed, and the city settled into its own rhythm again, though the scars of Veyron's collapse lingered across headlines. Gareth Sloan had vanished from the news cycle, whispered about only in fragments, rumors of him leaving Boston, talk of lawsuits circling like vultures, his name dragged across financial forums as the man who gutted a legacy company in under a year. The board moved swiftly, installing new governance, promising transparency, rebuilding bridges with clients I had once fought to protect. They offered me the crown he had lost. CEO, they said, with voices eager to repair their image through me. I smiled, shook their hands politely, and declined. Titles never mattered to me. What mattered was purpose, and I had no interest in trading one gilded cage for another. Instead, I returned to the place where it all began, the old library where I had once coded through the night while the janitor flicked the lights to signal closing time. The smell of paper and dust, the creak of wooden chairs, the silence thick enough to think it was there that I laid the first bricks of my framework. And there I decided to build something new. I called it Harper Analytics. Not a tower, not a corporation obsessed with quarterly margins, but a collective. I brought in young engineers, those too often overlooked or dismissed. We spread laptops across oak tables, and I mentored them the way no one had mentored me. We didn't chase shortcuts. We built foundations. One evening, as the lamps glowed warm against the library's high windows, a figure appeared in the doorway. Gareth Sloan. His suit was frayed at the seams, his shoes scuffed, his posture stripped of the swagger that once filled entire boardrooms. His voice trembled when he spoke. "Give me a role. Anything. I can't find work. No one will take my calls." For a moment, I saw not the tyrant who had erased my name, but a hollow man caught in the shadow of his own greed. Still, sympathy had no place here. I looked him in the eye and said, "Automation doesn't replace people. It exposes them." He dropped his gaze. No rebuttal left in him. I turned back to the students clustered at the tables, their screens alive with the hum of fresh ideas. My steps carried me past him without pause. Later, as I walked home under the dim glow of street lamps, I thought of the journey. They had tried to erase me, to bury my name under arrogance and theft, but code remembers. Systems remember. Revenge was never about noise, about flames or public spectacle. It was precision-measured lines of logic, exact and undeniable. And when the world forgets people, perhaps the truest justice is letting the truth write itself back in ink.